NaNoWriMo was upon us for yet another November, and I hope all of you had a good one. I'm excited to see everything that came out of the month. Even though I didn't start my next book in November, I did finish it. Anyway, we have an exciting topic to get to today, as I'm sure you already seen from the title. It's one of my favorite things as well, so let's talk about character arcs. Before we go any further, we need to know our types of characters, though. Not necessarily our types of arcs, because that is a whole enormous list that would probably take up this entire video. But if you're curious about some, there is a link to 3 common arcs in the description. So, what are our types of characters? Well, there are 4 that I know of right now, and those are round characters, flat characters, dynamic characters, and static characters. There's a possibility you've heard of these before, but just to refresh your memory, here's what they are. A round character is one that is presented in vivid, lifelike fullness and is layered and interesting and closely involved in the plot. In other words, they are a compelling character with interesting views and ideas and are layered with intrigue, backstories, belief, and whatnot. A flat character is one who is hardly developed, lacks depth or layers, and is one-dimensional. And what I mean by that is they have a straightforward and simple character, not really doing much besides just being a character. A dynamic character is one who undergoes a significant change as a result of the actions and plot of the story. A static character is one that remains largely the same throughout the story. Their morals, ideals, thoughts, person don't really change. Just because they don't change doesn't mean that they aren't layered or even have an arc. A lot of times a static character's arc is one of sticking to their beliefs and not changing who they are as a person. Something that I always like to remember with characters is that they are, in a sense, a lens for your world. If you've ever worked with a telescope before, you'll know that lenses are important for what you're trying to view in the sky. If you want to look at the sun, you need what is called a sun filter, since the sun is just way too bright to look at with the naked eye. If you're trying to look at a single star, the lens you'll need should magnify your view. However, if you're trying to look at multiple stars at once, maybe even a constellation like the Big Dipper, you're going to need a lens with a wider view to see everything. Sometimes that lens can even change the color of what you're viewing. In the same way, characters will act as lenses for your world. They are each a different perspective on things for your reader. As an example, say you have a kingdom in your story. Well, one character may view that kingdom as good, while another may view it as maybe not so good, or even bad. The way they view it comes from the kind of person or character they are. This is also what can add layers or depth to your character. While on that subject, let's examine how characters are given depth in the first place. First off, depth comes from the way in which a character deals with events or occurrences. A lot of times it's a negative event, but it doesn't always have to be that way. Ask yourself what, why, and how. What will be the occurrence? Why will be the reason a character has for actions? And how will be the end result, the occurrence and the reasons a character has. Let's say 2 characters lose a loved one. It's the way in which the character deals with that loss that the depth comes from. Does she mourn for a little bit before the author just decides to move on? Well, that doesn't add any depth to a character. In fact, it actually makes them less compelling and more flat. But, under the right circumstances, the author could do that on purpose and it still work. That character's heart could be so dead and so cold that they don't feel grief and move on from it quickly. That would definitely add depth. If done correctly, we can actually take the character's grieving process further. Maybe the grief drives her to do something wrong. Then she's dealing with the consequences of that wrong decision and the grief. That adds 2 layers of depth to the character. So now we have a what, a why, and a how. But what are they? Let's say this character from earlier is a horseback riding loner. Well, why is she a horseback riding loner? The what is the loss she experienced. The why is that she was driven to do something wrong. And the how is what she is now, a horseback riding loner. From here, you would explore the backstory of a character further to answer the what, why, and the how. This is our depth. But from here, how do we form a character arc? Character arcs are a lot like the diagram of a story arc shown here. We have the beginning of the journey, the middle, and the end. You should always start by establishing who your character is, and that should be near the beginning. You always start with the how first to establish your why and what in whatever order. Now, why do we start with the how? Isn't the how going to be at the end when our character has completed their journey? Well, yes, but there's always a reason why the character is here in the beginning. So let's take a look at our horseback riding loner from earlier. Now, before she was who she is now, she lived with her grandmother in a small village. How was she there? Well, maybe her parents brought her when she was very young to live with her grandma to protect her from something. See what I mean now? Try and figure out the what and why for yourself. From here, you can start the character on their journey. The what is the grandmother's death. The why is, again, the character doing something wrong. Then the how is what she finally becomes, the horseback riding loner. Once you've gotten a vague idea of your character's how, start asking the other two questions, and honestly just questions in general. What is her name? What does she look like? Anything you can think of. Stories are actually formed by questions. Now, your character, and listen to this, your character does not need a tragic backstory to give them depth. It could honestly just be as simple as they're a prince in the kingdom. But even though your character is just a prince, you still need to give them some history and a what, why, and how. I feel like this is something that isn't stressed enough in writing, so I'm telling you now. Whatever backstory you give your character, tragic or not, has to have some relevance to the narrative in the future. Once you've established what, why, and how for your character, the next step is to plan their future. This is the time to take all those crazy ideas in your head and just run with it. That said, there are a few important things to remember. First, you need to keep in mind that this is their journey. Find out if they're a round, dynamic, or a static character, and do everything in your power to keep them from being flat. Let me say that again. Do not make them flat. For a round or dynamic character, here are some guides you can follow. The character is going to need to undergo a change in their person. This character needs to change and grow. Growth needs to be gradual. Do not have them change instantly. That will make a flat character. They need to learn to grow. For a dynamic character, they're going to practically make a 180. This means that by the end, they'll be a completely different person. A redemption or corruption arc is a dynamic character. For a static character, here are some guides you can also follow. This character is going to grow, but not change. Usually a static character arc is learning to keep their ideals. If you want a good example of a static character, watch Princess Mononoke or The First Avenger. Prince Ashitaka and Steve Rogers are both great examples of static characters done really well. Okay, so here's the big question. Do all of your characters, even the minor ones, need to have a character arc? Not necessarily, but a good rule of thumb is if they're going to appear 2 to 3 times and be a part of the story, they probably should. Side characters don't necessarily need to be round or even dynamic. A little depth and some reasons will probably be okay. That said, it sure makes an interesting story if you have multiple characters with depth to them. It will actually make your world seem more realistic. Some of the most engaging characters are actually side characters. The reason they're so engaging is because the storyteller took the time to actually give them each a character arc. Now that we know what forms a character arc and what goes into them, you might be wondering what makes a character arc good and what makes one bad. Well, here are some thoughts on that. Number 1. A character, first of all, must have reasons for change. A lot of times an author will just say, okay, well now he's this, without giving a character a good reason for change. Just because another character accidentally spilled soup on another character won't turn them into a power-hungry maniac. Unless, of course, there was a good reason. And for that kind of thing, it's got to be a good one. Number 2. Change must happen gradually. If a character all of a sudden goes from being the bad guy to the good guy, or if a character switches sides, it's going to happen slowly. Not to mention, you have to have a good reason. Zuko is an example. He took the entire series, minus a few episodes of course, to change. Even if a character is not switching sides, growth is not going to happen instantly. Think about it like learning an instrument. Are you going to sit down after playing the piano for like a day and instantly be able to play the Moonlight Sonata? Trust me, I don't think that's gonna happen. I've been playing piano for a couple of years and still, the Moonlight Sonata drove me a little bit crazy. Number 3, change has ups and downs. Even if the character has reasons for change and it happens slowly over time, the character is still going to have trouble changing. The character's journey is not going to be a smooth, straight shot. Again, back to an instrument, even if you've been playing it for years, you're still going to struggle with certain things. I have one last question to answer before I leave you to write your story. We've learned all about character arcs now, but why are they important in the first place? First off, the arc of a character demonstrates their growth. Everyone grows in their life, physically and mentally. Giving that to your character makes them more relatable. And on that note, second, the arc of a character makes them relatable. People in real life experience a character arc in some respect. Your character may go through some of the same ups and downs as a reader, and a reader can easily connect and even learn from the character if the arc is realistic. Last of all, the arc of a character, their struggles and good times, shows that they're human. A character's personality is best revealed through their lows and highs, just like in real life. Now, go write your story. Tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. That's all I've got today for you. Have a great Christmas. Hopefully, I'll see you one last time before we transition into 2022.